Might have been user error, might have been... Hey everyone, the last parts that I need finally showed up. These are shackles, new shackles for the new leaf spring, and this video is going to be reassembling the axle, putting it back on the car, and hopefully taking a test drive. I don't really know that I needed new shackles, as the old ones are still in good shape, but I couldn't get the bushings out of the old leaf spring, and rather than try to get them out and completely ruin them, I just figured I'd order new bushings, and the cost of new shackles with new bushings on them was not much more than the cost of just the new bushings, so I figured I might as well get a brand new set and have all of the shininess instead of some of the shininess. Also, my plan is to assemble a lot of the axle on the bench. I think that would make it a lot easier, and then just lift it up, put it down onto this dolly, slide it into place, and then I can have most of the work done at a more comfortable level. Also, before I put everything together, while it's still not in the way, I want to do something with this painted part of the axle over the repair to try to make it look less obvious. And I was brainstorming a couple ideas. The first idea that I came up with is this stainless steel exhaust clamp, which I think would look most of the part, but I was concerned about the way that this flange mounts and where to put it and if that would be unsightly. I also thought about cutting the flange off and using some sort of metal zip ties to hold it into place, which I think should still work and would probably look good enough, but I think I found an easier solution. I picked up some chrome vinyl, and I'll put the link to both of these things in the description if you're interested, and I cut a piece that is wider than the repair, and I also rounded the corners just to make it less likely to start peeling at the corners. This should be really quick and easy to cover up this painted part. It should look 90% as good as the regular chrome, and if it does get damaged or does need replacing, I have a whole roll of it and it is going to be super easy to replace. Let's get to it. This goes on first, then everything else gets assembled, then the axle goes onto the car, and then we drive. It definitely doesn't look perfect. There are some wrinkles and bubbles just because this part of the axle is slightly smaller in diameter because it doesn't have the chrome plating on it. I might in the future, once I've put a few miles on this axle and know that it's not going to be a problem, come back around with some filler and just make it the same diameter and then redo this. But I think for a first attempt, like I said, I have plenty more. This looks really, from 10 or 15 feet away, you're probably not even going to be able to notice it. Or at the very least, it's not going to catch your eye, which is exactly what I wanted. So, on to the assembly. Alright, I didn't get very far and already ran into a snag. I don't know what happened to this stud. I guess the nut got cross-threaded, and it was either cross-threaded, something wasn't threaded right, and might have been user error, might have been faulty part, but the stud has completely broken off the shackle. So there's probably enough threads to put a nut on there, but I'm gonna just pull this side off and replace it with one of the old shackles, and then just have it like that. With the new leaf spring in place, the next thing is to set up the spindles again. This kingpin set screw that doesn't actually go all the way through, I'm gonna take this out, and I ordered some proper stainless steel set screws that will replace it and are actually going to be long enough to set the kingpin properly. So, all right, this has to go on there, and then same for the other side. The axle is pretty much entirely reassembled as far as I could get it while it's up on the bench. I need to, in preparation for the new spring and replacing the axle, I need to get this old spring out of the way. It's just a matter of taking off these 4 bolts underneath here, which drop these U-bolts, and then it'll be ready for the new axle. And that's all also surprisingly loose, considering I didn't do anything to this. So I'm going to give that a good tighten up as well, because that will probably contribute to some of the Deathwobble that I had. The axle is officially mounted back onto the car via the leaf spring. I did have to remove the smallest leaf because the U-bolts that were existing were cut so that they were only just big enough, presumably so that they don't hit the cover, which I don't think will be a problem. The old leaf spring was a single leaf spring. This one was originally 4, now it's 3. I'm not going to know how well it drives until I drive it, and then I might have to take it apart and tune it a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to go with the 3 leaf springs. Next thing, I need to put this cover back on. The next thing is I will probably put the front of the radius arms onto the bat wings, and then once I get those on, I'll be able to find out my final length for mounting them back here, and then I can go ahead and do that. The other thing I need to do is hook up the steering from the drag link to the steering arm here, and it turns out this was a tapered stud. This is a tapered hole, which is kind of cool to know that I have this piece, because now I can swap this out for another one with a tapered hole and know that I have the piece that I need to make my heim joint work with it. But in the meantime, this had a stack of washers on the bottom of it that was enough to space it out to get the threads. I did not like that at all, and so I got a misalignment washer that I may need to cut down a little bit on this side of it to get it to sit flush on the heim joint, but I think that should hold this whole assembly together quite a bit better than what it was before, and should also reduce my death wobble. Now that the friction shocks are attached and the spring is attached, I'm gonna set the caster, and the way that I'm gonna do that is with this dial gauge, and I have it right against this presumably up and down portion of the brake holder, and right now it's set right at, it looks like 91, and I'm just gonna rock it back maybe about 7 degrees. So I'm targeting 6 degrees, 84 degrees. And let's see if I can do that while holding the camera also. Almost. So that looks pretty good. I'll start with that, and if I need to adjust it later, then it'll be easy enough. With my caster set, I'm going to start on the driver's side. I have the heim joint put in the back. I have these clevis ends put in the front, just in random places, and I figure the easiest way to mount this radius rod while also maintaining the caster is I'm gonna put this one in a bit more, and then I'm going to bolt this down here to the bottom of the bat wing, and then slowly adjust the top either in or out to line up the heim joint with the mounting point back here. And then once this is lined up, then I can just attach this, and I will know that my radius rod is installed, and my caster setting was maintained. Well, that was quite a bit easier said than done, but the driver's side radius rod is fully installed. It's better now because I'm using misalignment washers in the back here instead of just this spacer that was there previously. And my caster is still pretty much right where I set it. So I'm calling this one a success. Now it's just time to do the other side. What I'm doing for the other side is first I am lining up the nuts and the bolts on this side for the top and bottom clevis. And that way when I install it into the other arm, I know that the ultimate length and settings will be the exact same as this side. Then I just have to throw it on and I'm done. With both radius rods installed and tightened down and the caster still looking good, I'm going to go ahead and install the center link, and then next thing up is going to be the drag link so I can get all of the steering put back together. I got the center link on, and at this point it's important to check the toe in and toe out. And I'm gonna try to do this. There's not a ton of room here. But roughly from outside of, or from the spindle face where my thumb is to spindle face is roughly 46 1/8 inches on the back, and roughly 45 7/8 or so inches on the front. So what that means is the back of the spindles are farther apart than the front of the spindles. So the tires are going to end up slightly toed in, which is, I think, what we want in this situation, because as we drive forward, it's going to want to spread the front of the front tires out, and that's going to provide some stability in the steering. So I think I'm going to leave this just the way it is. I have the caster set now, I have the toe in set, and really I'm not going to know how this does how this performs until I take it for a test drive. But for just right now, while it's still on jack stands, I think this is going to be perfect. Next up is reinstalling this tapered stud into this steering arm so I can attach the drag link to the steering arm. It looks like there's enough thread sticking through that I don't need to worry about a washer on this side. And now on this side, the problem that I was running into is this heim joint fits up on this stud, but there's enough shoulder here that isn't threaded that by the time you put the nut on and tighten it down, it only tightens down to here. So that doesn't hold the heim joint in place very well, and so I got this misalignment washer, but the issue now is that I can't get it up far enough for it to do what I need it to do, because this heim joint can still drop down. So what I need to do, and to show that a little bit more clearly without the heim joint in the way, if I can get this back out, is that those 2 points hit each other. So what I'm going to do is throw this in the lathe and cut down this shoulder part about half the length, if not a little bit more, and then that will let me put it in the heim joint all the way up to the shoulder, and then that should take up the rest of the shoulder on this stud, so that when I tighten the nut against it, I'll have a really tight connection, and the heim joint itself will be exactly positioned and not slide around up and down. If you've been watching this channel for a long time, it's been a while since I used this. It's still here and it's still handy to have. The way that I chucked up this piece, because it's such kind of an odd shape and there's not much room to grab onto it here, I found this sacrificial piece of aluminum. I think this was for a leaf scoop, like for a pool. This was the handle. And so what I did is I chucked it up. It's about the exact inside diameter of this misalignment spacer. So it's going through out the end of the lathe. I chucked it up here to hold it steady, and I used that to set the orientation of the misalignment spacer in the chuck, so that now when I've tightened it down, it should spin pretty smoothly. And now all I have to do is come in here with the tool and shave off about half the length of that shoulder, and this should be good to go. And there we go. I wonder if I went all the way through it. It looks like should be pretty good. So let's loosen this up and see if we can get the part out of here. And I bet it's quite hot, so I'm not gonna try to grab onto it just yet. but I think that worked out really nicely. Now that it's cooled down a little bit, I pulled it off the mandrel that I was using, and that's exactly what I need. So now we can take this and confidently tighten down this bottom nut in such a way that it's going to hold my steering very tight, and it looks better. I don't need a giant stack of washers, and I just overall feel a lot better about this. So now I just need to tighten this up, and then the last thing is throwing on the wheels and the brakes, and we're going to be ready for a test drive. And that's it. Everything's back together. Brakes are reinstalled, wheels are reinstalled, all the steering components are reinstalled and made better. Everything is tight. New chrome leaf spring looks very nice. New shackles with the bolts pointed out so they don't interfere with the axle anymore. Pretty much the only thing left to do is admire the work and take it for a test drive. A couple things to note. One, I didn't replace the steering arms, even though I have replacement steering arms, because the way the spindle is shaped, they don't fit exactly right. I'm going to have to make some pieces to some spacers in here to be able to mount them, and then also get longer bolts and nuts, and it was just more than I wanted to do at this point, but it'll be easy enough to do sooner rather than later anyway. And I also already have a new longer length chrome center link, so I have all the parts with the exception of the custom spacers, and so that will be now another video, which is fine. I think this vinyl doesn't look perfect, but it looks pretty good, and the further away you get, the better it looks. And then if you like this little project mini series on this car, stay tuned, because I have to do the steering project, so that will be another video coming at some point. I have a leaky radiator and a new radiator on deck, so a radiator swap is going to be coming soon. I want to switch out the shifter from a just nothing protecting you from shifting it into different gears while you're driving shifter to something with a reverse lockout. And then finally, I have a GPS speedometer that I'm going to be replacing the cable speedometer that I don't think, judging by the mileage, has ever worked. So those are going to be some upcoming videos on this car. If you like this car and you like the projects, stay tuned, like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below with any thoughts or suggestions, And then now it's time for a quick test drive.